Lewis and Reinhold, page 269 to 271. The dictatorship of Sulla. After thus crushing Italy by war, fire, and murder, Sulla's general visited the several cities and established garrisons at the suspected places. Sulla himself called the Roman people together in an assembly and made them a speech vaunting his own exploits and making other menacing statements in order to inspire terror. He finished by saying that he would bring about a change which would be beneficial to the people if they would obey him. But of his enemies he would spare none, but would visit them with the utmost severity. He would take vengeance by strong measures on the praetors, quaestors, military tribunes, and everyone else who had committed any hostile act after the day when the consul Scipio violated the agreement with him. After saying this, he forthwith prescribed about 40 senators and 1,600 equities. He seems to have been the first to make such a formal list of those whom he condemned to death, to offer prizes to assassins and rewards to informers, and to threaten with punishment those who concealed the prescribed. Shortly afterwards, he added the names of other senators to prescription. Some of these, taken unawares, were killed where they were caught, in their homes, in the streets, or in the temples. Others were hurled through mid-air and thrown at Sulla's feet. Others were dragged through the city and trampled on. None of the spectators during utter a word of remonstrance against these horrors. Banishment was inflicted upon some and confiscation upon others. Spies were searching everywhere for these who had fled from the city, and those whom they caught they killed. There was much massacre, banishment, and confiscation also among those Italians who had obeyed Carbo, Norbanus, Marius, or their lieutenants. Severe judgments of the courts were rendered against them throughout all Italy on various charges: for exercising military command, for serving the army, for contributing money, for rendering other service, or even for giving counsel against Sulla. Hospitality, private friendship, the borrowing or lending of money were alike accounted crimes. Now and then one would be arrested for doing a kindness to a suspect or merely for being his companion on a journey. These accusations abounded mostly against the rich. When charges against individuals were exhausted, Sulla took vengeance on whole communities. He punished some of them by demolishing their citadels or destroying their walls, or by imposing collective fines and crushing them under heavy contributions. Among most of them, he placed colonies of his troops in order to hold Italy under garrison, sequestering their lands and houses and dividing them among his soldiers, whom he thus made true to him even after his death. When everything had been accomplished against his enemies as he desired, and there was no longer any hostile force except that of Sertorius, Sulla sent Metellus into Spain against him and arranged everything in the city to suit himself. There was no longer any occasion for laws or elections or casting lots, because everybody was shivering with fear and in hiding or dumb. Everything that Sulla had done as consul or as proconsul was confirmed and ratified, and his gilded equestrian statue was erected in front of the rostra with the inscription, Cornelius Sulla, Commander, ever fortunate. Thus Sulla became a king or tyrant de facto, not elected, but holding power by force and violence. There had been autocratic rule before that of the dictators, but it was limited to short periods. Under Sulla, it first became unlimited and so an absolute tyranny, but this much was added for propriety's sake, that they chose him dictator for the enactment of such laws as he himself might deem best and for the settlement of the commonwealth. By way of keeping up with the by keeping up the form of the republic, he allowed them to elect consuls. Marcus Tullius and Cornelius Dolabella were chosen, but Sulla, like a reigning sovereign, was dictator over the consuls. 24 axes were born in front of him as dictator, the same number that had been born before the ancient kings, and he had also a large bodyguard. He repealed laws and enacted others. He forbade anybody to hold the office of proctor until he had held that of quaestor, or to be consul before he had been praetor, and he prohibited any man from holding the same office a second time till after a lapse of 10 years. He reduced the tribune's power to such impotence as practically to destroy it, and he curtailed it by a law which provided that one holding the office of tribune should never afterward hold any other office, for which reason all men of reputation or family who formerly had contended for this office shunned it thereafter. To the Senate, which had been much thinned by the sedition and the wars, he added about 300 members for the best of the equities, taking the votes of the tribes on each one. To the plebeians, he added more than 10,000 slaves of the men who had been killed, choosing the youngest and strongest, to whom he gave freedom and Roman citizenship, and he called them Cornelii after himself. In this way, he made sure of having 10,000 men among the plebeians always ready to obey his commands. In order to provide the same kind of safeguard throughout Italy, he distributed to the 23 legions that had served under him a great deal of land in the various communities, some of which was public property and some taken from the communities by way of penalty. The following year, Sulla, although he was dictator, undertook the consulship a second time with Martellus Pius for his colleague, in order to preserve the pretense and form of democratic government. The next year, the people, in order to pay court to Sulla, chose him consul again, but he refused the office and nominated Servius Isauricus and Claudius Pulcher, and voluntarily laid down the supreme power, although nobody interfered with him.